What is up? I'm John Hansen. Welcome to your Week 10 waiver wire report here at fantasypoints.com. I am once again recording this way too late on Monday night, coming out of Week 9, watching Chargers Jets right now. Actually, I'm doing this before halftime. It's still way too late for me. I was thinking, actually, before I get into the waiver wire report, it's kind of funny that doing a lot more on camera work here without any man makeup. I used to have a joke even when I was in my 30s doing television for Comcast because I worked so much during the season. I would joke that early in the year I look like an ugly Brad Pitt, but by the end of the year I look like a handsome Abe Vigoda. And here we are. It's Week 10. We're getting there. But we continue to grind onward and upward because the waiver wire is always kicking out some viable assets, if you will. So let's get right into it here. Once again, every week we do a very comprehensive waiver wire report over at fantasypoints.com. The grinder, Tom Brawley, does most of the heavy lifting. I go in there, do some tweaking. We have others who contribute, but I pop in there with my top 15 priority ads for the week. They're mostly players who have done something of note coming out of the week, or maybe have their situation improved. People who jump off the screen to me based on basically what happened in the here and now last week. So that's where I'm at. Sometimes they are still short-term pickups versus long-term pickups, although the long-term right now, of course, we're running out of long-term here heading into week number 10. We've got 5 weeks left of the regular season. So let's get into it. At quarterback, we'll start. Well, here we are back where we started, really, in terms of the waiver wire. Very early did a video. I remember, I don't know, week 2, week 3, just giving mad love to Josh Dobbs. And here we are again. Obviously, he was traded to the Vikings last Tuesday. I did the waiver wire video. I do these on Monday night, so I wasn't able to comment on that. But I did write in the article adding him to my top 15 priority ads. I did add him as my number one quarterback ad, and I wrote that I think he has QB1 potential here, believe it or not. And I'm not really trying to be a hot take guy, but the guy does run now. He's averaging 40 rushing yards a game over his last 8 games with 4 rushing touchdowns. And of course, certainly it was crazy, fluky maybe, but maybe not, because Josh Dobbs has been absolute magic. Dude steps into the lineup, doesn't even know the names of all his linemen, for example, and puts up a season high 69.9 fantasy points. We could be getting Justin Jefferson back pretty soon. I have a good feeling about it. They've reeled off some wins now, and they're in playoff contention, well within playoff contention. So I do think we'll likely get Justin Jefferson back pretty soon. Of course, the contract, I guess you could argue, is an issue, but my man is a professional. He signed a contract to play the 2023 season. They're in a playoff push here, so I would imagine Mr. Jefferson will play here. And as we sit right now, Minnesota is, not only are they in the race, they're in the playoffs right now as the 7 seed. So it's a good situation. They block it up pretty well. Jordan Addison, as I kind of wrote and talked about last week, I could see him working improvisationally, scramble drill wise, with Josh Dobbs, who, does have that second reaction ability, unlike Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins is obviously very well versed in the offense, very accurate, plays within the timing of the play very well in this offense. So you lose a lot passing the ball, but you also gain that mobility that Josh Dobbs has to extend those plays. And then now it's just scramble drill time. Russell Wilson, back in the day in Seattle, and all these other scrambling quarterbacks. So I do like that for him. Addison in particular is a really good receiver for that type of play and that type of environment. And Josh Dobbs has really clicked and leaned on his tight ends. First, it was Zach Ertz, then it was Trey McBride, and then week 9, of course, it was T.J. Hockenson, another quarterback that I'll mention. And, we're dealing with mostly the, bottom half of the league here, in the waiver wire report. And there's a lot of sameness among the quarterbacks ranked like 15 to 25, like dart throw time, a lot of these guys. But Russell Wilson, owned in fewer than 50% of Yahoo leagues, that didn't trade away any of those receivers. They're talking about coming out of the bye, getting our guy Marv Mims more involved. Greg Dulcich will be coming back at some point relatively soon. I think it's another week for Greg Dulcich, who's very, very talented and a very, very good schedule coming out of this bye for fantasy and reality. At Buffalo, Minnesota, Cleveland, Houston, Chargers, Lions, Patriots, Chargers. Pretty darn good here. I've had a pretty good vibe on Russell Wilson all off season, actually. It didn't really feel like, all into it this summer, but I have stated, it was been my opinion that, oh yeah, last year was last year. It was going to work out for fantasy. And that has absolutely come true, basically. Although it's certainly been ugly. Let's move on here. The Week 10 waiver wire report at fantasypoints.com. Obviously, Keaton Mitchell. It's a little annoying because I don't know if we got really any tip off on this whatsoever. The reporting has been lax, non-existent. We all got a little excited when Keaton Mitchell was activated a few weeks ago, but then he had the hammy. So you just didn't know. And now the cat's out of the bag. It would have been nice for us who, pay close attention if maybe came in there and had 5-6 carries, popped off a couple, showed a lot of potential, and you could see an opportunity and you're like, oh, go get him. Well, now I think the cat is certainly out of the bag. I mean, the comparison that comes to mind is Devon Achane, excuse me, for the Miami Dolphins. What he's been able to do this year, obviously when healthy, with somewhat minimal touches. I mean, they certainly don't want to roll with a backfield of Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. That is one of the worst and most boring backfields I've seen in quite some time. Justice Hill should have hit my receiving prop last week, by the way. He dropped basically a touchdown reception, but that's neither here nor there. He's been hanging in there, but he's a jag. I could see Mitchell getting a role like Devon Achane, like 7-8 carries. He can catch the ball as well. Obviously, very, very explosive. Moving on, I think I talked about Zach Charbonnet last week, and things got, well, at the very least, a little worse for Ken the Bouncer Walker, who had a very, very poor game. But Charbonnet, got, season highs in scrimmage yards, for example, and fantasy points. So I'm thinking right now, carving out of some standalone value, and, certainly needs Ken Walker to get hurt, but I mean, Ken Walker, that's kind of what he does. He does get hurt. So I think, not to curse the guy or be a hater or anything, but like I said last week, we're kind of due for a Ken Walker injury. But again, Zach Charbonnet, by the way, and this is really the point, I believe Pete Carroll isn't in this for fantasy football, right? He wants to play his best players. I mean, we might be a week or two away from Zach Charbonnet getting more and more play, because he is certainly much more of a decisive downhill runner. And unlike Ken Walker, who, again, is always bouncing, looking for daylight to break a long run, the offense is struggling a little bit too. Maybe they lean into Zach Charbonnet a little bit. So he should be owned. We'll move on to Ty Chandler. Unfortunately for Cam Akers, he is going to be lost for the season with another Achilles injury, and that's devastating for him in his career. But they absolutely need some juice behind and alongside Alexander Madison in the backfield. And, we're running out of bodies at this point. Ty Chandler, nice kid, by the way. I talked with him at the Combine a couple of years ago. He's kind of underwhelmed, but he does have versatility and he does have some juice. Let's move on. Not much else going on there at running back. So we'll go to the wideouts. I mean, Tank Dell, come on. Unbelievable performance in week number 9. Demario Douglas, I believe we gave him some love last week with my guy Kendrick Bourne out. Douglas, once again, he's kind of the one, for lack of a better way of putting it. 93% snap share last week in week 9, or 83, that did lead the team. He's got now 14 grabs for a $133 on 20 targets with 3 carries for 24 in his last 3 weeks. I look at him as a double digit fantasy point guy. He's got a real shot for it. So there it is. There's that. We did see Juju a little bit involved. But I kind of like Demario Douglas here. He's, again, giving them some juice, and when in doubt, I go young. We'll see what Quentin Johnston does. I am recording this right smack in the middle of week number 9. In fact, Justin Herbert just got sacked. It's in the first half still, but Quentin Johnston certainly is going to be needed. The matchups they'll be better than tonight's or week 9's against the Jets. That is for sure. The Jets are doing a heck of a job here, and Johnston, he's not doing much. He's got 1 grab for 4. So I'll move on to Wan'Dale Robinson. And look, sometimes out of a complete disaster, a fantasy asset can be born, and it's somewhat rare, but I do believe we're looking at Matt Barkley for the New York Football Giants. So he's a professional quarterback, not a big arm, can get rid of the ball quickly and get the ball to a guy like Wan'Dale in the short area, I believe, consistently. So I think Wan'Dale's probably a good bet to catch 5 to 6 balls for what it's worth. Moving on to some other names, I'm really liking Khalil Shakir. I think it's still a little bit of logjam there in Buffalo, but I mentioned this morning on SiriusXM, I don't know if anyone's ever made this comparison, but what Khalil Shakir is showing is almost exactly what I thought Sky Moore would be. I'm still not sure exactly what is up with Sky Moore, but he did make some plays this week, but not that we're picking him up. Noah Brown for the Houston Texans, pretty good player dating back to his years in Dallas. Now, I don't know if this is going to stick. Robert Woods, I guess, is week to week. Or he's on IR, or no, he was on IR, and I think he's right now week to week. But in this case, he's looked just so good that in case there's something here, I would maybe pick him up for depth. I'm still not giving up on Jonathan Mingo, by the way. Don't use him or Bryce Young against defenses that are zone heavy. It's one of the benefits of Fantasy Points data, everything that we offer there at fantasypoints.com. We kind of knew this. I kind of knew this. But against teams that are man heavy, sometimes these teams do change it up, but teams that are man heavy, you can use the Jonathan Mingo. I'll also re-mention once again Michael Wilson for the Cardinals. He missed week 9, but Kyler Murray is returning. So there's a pretty good opportunity there. Let's go to tight ends. No one listened to me on Hunter Henry apparently last week. I thought I was waxing poetic about Hunter Henry. I'm not even sure. Sometimes I talk and not even sure where I'm talking. But anybody who listened to me, at least on the radio or read the columns, know I was loving me some Hunter Henry last week. Nobody, and as a pickup, by the way, for the long term, nobody listened. He's still owned in 23% of Yahoo leagues. I know they are a little bit of a train wreck. You worry about things completely falling apart and or them basically completely bailing on Mac Jones. But as long as they're not quitting, it's a pretty good spot. He was a tight end 1 in week 9. I do love me some Hunter Henry. How about Cade Otton? I gave him some love last week in my Sunday column along with Hunter Henry. I actually predicted a touchdown from him on SiriusXM. I think he's kind of emerging now as like option no worse than 3, but maybe some weeks 2A, over a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin. But Otton has not been rotten. He has 15 catches for 140 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns on 20 targets in his last 3 games. Now, before we get that excited, I've kind of noticed over the last 2-3 weeks, when you look at defenses covering tight ends, everyone's bad. Everyone does well at tight end now. If you look at even your stat leaders, It's all tight ends leading teams and all that. And that is a function of teams taking away the deep ball and all that good stuff. So it is what it is. We're getting more tight end action than ever. Luke Musgrave made a big play last week. That was pretty sweet. Gerald Everett still playing this week. He's got 2 catches for 18 as I record this right now. Hopefully he gets, well, at least one more catch, because I think I had a prop for over like 23 yards. I would think we would get that here going into halftime. Look, Palmer is on IR for the Chargers, and Quentin Johnson is not exactly ready for prime time. I mean, they really do need Gerald Everett to step up. There it is. I think I've covered most of the top options here, at least my top 10. That's absolutely did just that. Covered all, actually, it's top 15. Covered all 15 of those. If you want to subscribe to the website, by the way, if you're still watching and you're not a subscriber, we have slashed the prices almost actually in half, and you could save an additional 25% using the promo code Gurific25. And we are doing all of our live streams for week 10 free. So make sure you continue to check out the YouTube page. Thursday, we do the matchup points live stream with Brett Whitefield and Adam Kaplan, dropping dimes of nuggets and knowledge, if you will, on the weekly basis on that one there. So you can check that out for week number 10. We'll catch you next week. Once again, thanks for liking and subscribing. We'll catch you next time at fantasypoints.com.